everyone, and welcome to the Savvy Cast. Whether you are watching on YouTube or listening to the audio, thank you for being here. I went through one of the hardest weeks of my life this week. And those of you who follow me, especially on Instagram, where most of my day to day takes place, you know that I had to say goodbye to my beloved Cam, my golden doodle, my sidekick, and my shadow of 6 years. My heart is broken in a million pieces. And this is not something that I necessarily wanted to put on the podcast, but I'm doing this for two reasons. Number one, Cam is part of Family Savvy, and anyone who's followed me for long feels like they know Cam, they love Cam, and they want to know what happened because I was sharing bits and pieces of what was happening as it was happening. And literally, the outpouring of love and support and encouragement was amazing. And it helped me get through what happened so much more easily, probably, than had I not had that. And number two, because based upon my experience and everything that I heard from all of those who were sending wishes and thoughts and prayers my way, I saw a very common denominator in that this is a universal situation for anyone who's a pet owner, especially a dog, because our dogs almost always go before we do. They are the most wonderful creatures on earth, but they do not live long. Whether it's 6 years, 10 years, or 16 years, if you love your dog, they're never here long enough, and they typically go before we do. So I just thought that this was a topic that, even though it is not a pleasant or a happy topic, it's something that's just part of life. And I'm just going to share my story in detail here because Instagram was not a place that I could fully answer questions. So I'm just going to share the story here. And for those of you who may not know who Cam is or have never seen his picture, I will have plenty of those on the show notes. And also, if you go to my Instagram, family_savvy, there's a highlight just entitled Cam, and it has pictures and videos of him. And I don't plan to take that down, and at least not right now. So you can also see Cam there. I will just start by telling you just a bit about Cam. Cam is an F1B Golden Doodle, which basically means he's 75% standard poodle, 25% Golden Doodle. He was 6 years old and he was beautiful. He had a fabulous personality. He loved people and he loved to go. He just wanted to go wherever I went. And all of my friends and those who know me probably just chuckled because they knew that if I could take him wherever we were going, he would go. The only places that I typically couldn't take him were restaurants and the grocery store. But other than that, he was always with me, and he loved to go to the summit. That's where I do most of my shopping for clothing or whatever. And he would go with me. And I will tell you that he was very well known at the summit. And pre-COVID, when there were no masks and people mingled and life was normal, we would go in any given store, particularly the Apple store or Athleta or Saks, and he would always draw a crowd, whether it was employees or whether it were customers. He always had people that were drawn to him that would come up and pet him or ask to take his picture. And that is one thing that I loved so much about carrying Cam with me, is because it made me meet so many new people and make so many new friends. And so many of the friends I have now that I met and made friends with at the summit, I would not have were it not for Cam. He was just like a people magnet. And I just loved that about him. Cam was blonde. He had just a beautiful coat. It wasn't tight or curly. It was just a beautiful blonde coat. And you'll see if you look at the pictures. He had a very interesting personality, and our pets do sort of meld to our personality, but he was funny. He was a beggar. He was a counter surfer. I came home many a day where he had got opened the trash, pulled it out, and gotten food out. He's eaten many a loaf of Dave's Killer Bread, and he's eaten so many things that he shouldn't have, but we always loved and laughed at his shenanigans because he was just so precious. Cam was interesting in that he was almost like a grandpa, in that when he was just with me around the house and we weren't going or doing something, he would just lay around a lot. He wasn't the type of dog that just jumped around and ran around all the time, although he would do that if people came to the house or other dogs came, and he would run out and play. But just his general demeanor was just very chill. And that is one thing that people would comment about when I would take him to the summit is, oh my goodness, he is so calm and so good. And he just lays here and looks and watches. And so he had a great personality to get to go out with me and do things. So I just want to start with what the last week entailed for those of you who have asked. My husband had gone on a trip to carry our youngest daughter and some friends to Miami. So I was here with Cam, and we just had 5 to 7 days where it was just going to be us. Life was great. Life was normal, life per usual. And last Wednesday, the 14th, one of my daughters who lives here in Birmingham, she's a nurse, but she was off and she was here helping me with some social media. And she said, Mom, there's some blood on the white cowhide rug. So I immediately thought that Cam had stepped on some glass from a vase that I had broken that morning and thought that I'd cleaned up. So I said, okay, I'm going to carry him to the vet. And it was late in the afternoon. It was about 4:30. And she said, Mom, it's almost time for the vet to close. Do you really think you need to go? And I almost didn't take him, but then I thought, I better go. So I went ahead, put him in the car, and we went to the vet. And I was like, you're going to get the glass out. This is just going to be quick and easy. So the doctor came in and she was examining the paw. And then all of a sudden I saw her grab his face, and she said, his nose is bleeding. The blood is coming from his nose. Her whole demeanor changed. She got very serious. Then she started feeling under his arms and around his neck. And she said, and his lymph nodes are swollen, they're enlarged. And then she palpated his tummy and she said, and he seems to be swollen in his abdominal area. So she drew blood and came back and said he had very, very low platelets. And she said, all of these factors together, there's a lot of cause for concern. So in the course of that conversation, she said the word cancer more than once. She said that that was something that at that point was on the table. She also mentioned tick-borne illness and an immune-mediated disorder, some sort of immune response that was causing him to have low platelets, enlarged lymph nodes, and bleeding. So she sent me home with doxycycline, which would be an antibiotic to treat any type of tick-borne illness. She also put Cam on steroids to try to get the immune system such that he would build platelets and the body would not attack them. And she sent off tick tests and did a profile that would have tested for indicators for cancer. So she did those tests and sent us home with the medication. Well, later that night, Cam started bleeding more from his nose, and he started doing this reverse sneezing that is actually harmless, but because his nose was bleeding and he was doing that, it's almost like a snorting. I got very scared because she had told me to watch, and that if his nose started bleeding or there was any blood, that could be serious, and to either call or go see an emergency vet. So I took him to an emergency vet, and they put some medication, liquid, injected it into his nostril, and gave that to me to take home because it was so late in the morning that they knew he was going to go see his regular vet. So we didn't do much there, but we knew he was safe to go home. So the next morning, Thursday morning, went back to his vet, and the doctor came in. It was a different doctor, and she said that his platelets were still low, even though he had started the steroids. It was about 12 hours before, but she said it's only been 12 hours, so we're going to see. It may just take more time. And she said, what we're going to do is give him an injection of vincristine, I believe it was. It's a chemotherapy drug that they will often give to dogs to try to boost their system to create more platelets more quickly. And she says it's usually very effective. So we're going to give him the vincristine and you come back tomorrow. So we went back the next day and she came in after they drew blood work first, and she came back in. This is the third day, and I could tell by her demeanor that nothing had happened. And she said, it didn't work. She said, I've never really seen this not work. And she said, I could tell by her demeanor, it just was not, there was nothing hopeful she could tell me at that point. She said, there are other things we can move to. There are some other options that we can try. And then she said, he may just need more time. And that was not encouraging to me because we're on day 3. So she said, we can try this, we can try this. And I just knew that we were on the 3rd day. This started on Wednesday and this was Friday, and they had tried several things. I said, can I take him to Auburn? Would that be a wise decision? And she said, absolutely. She said, you'll have some of the best minds in one place. So absolutely, I will send his labs and his information and you just go. So I took Cam straight from the vet in Birmingham, put him in the car and drove straight to Auburn. So he was admitted into the emergency aspect or the emergency wing of the Auburn Veterinary Clinic. And that is a teaching hospital. And that is where any vet in the vicinity or anywhere that wants, I guess, the most advanced options, that's one of the places they would send dogs. Mississippi State is another option. And I do believe there's a teaching hospital, a veterinary teaching hospital in Louisiana, but Auburn is fabulous. And I knew that I was taking him to the best possible place for treatment and diagnosis. So because of COVID, I could not go in. No one could go in. You had to call when you got there and you had to take all the leashes off, and they put their own leash on the dog and they took your pet in. I filled out all the forms and signed all the waivers, and they said the best thing for Cam, based on what we've seen from his vet and the situation, is that we keep him at least over the weekend. This is a Friday, and we observe him and we have 24/7 physicians on hand, where if the bleeding started, there's someone there who can quickly do a transfusion or whatever needs to be done, because internal bleeding can escalate quickly. So I went home. Zane was not due home until Sunday. So I went home, and thankfully my best friend lives within walking distance of me, and she kept me busy and occupied and as distracted as possible all weekend. And one of my daughters came over and spent the night and just helped me through those first few nights that he was in Auburn. And they call you once or twice a day from Auburn, from the clinic, to give you updates. And over the weekend, they did do one blood draw, but they said, first of all, Cam is joyful. He's happy. He's friendly. And every time they would talk about his demeanor, they said, and he's loud, and they chuckled. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, he barks a lot. And I knew immediately what he was doing. When he does not know where I am, he will bark, and until he finds me. So that was always just, almost every call had a good update on his demeanor. And they said, from the medical standpoint, his platelets have not risen. That is concerning. But then they would follow that with, but maybe it just takes more time for Cam. So we're going to just continue what we're doing, the doxycycline and the steroids, and just monitoring him for internal bleeding. So Saturday, same thing. There was just nothing, no improvement. Platelets were still low. And they said, we will give him a day off, and then we will reassess on Monday. So, and this all starts running together because it's day and night, and Zane was gone. It was just a very trying few days, and things do run together just a little bit. But Monday, Zane got home Sunday, and the report that Sunday was still no increase. We're just going to give it a little more time, and maybe Monday we'll do another test and we will see what's going on. So Monday came and they did call us with blood work, and again, no increase in platelets. In fact, it was going down. They had seen just a little bit of internal bleeding, and he said, but it's manageable. So once again, give us another day to just monitor. Monday night, Zane and my phone rang at midnight and my heart sank because I knew that it would not be a good call. So doctor, and it's thankfully the same doctor was with Cam from the time they moved him from the emergency room to the infectious disease department. And it was Dr. Sender. He was with Cam from beginning to end. And I could tell by his voice, he didn't even want to tell us, but he said, Cam needs a blood transfusion. He is losing blood. He's bleeding internally. And basically, without saying it in these words, if he doesn't get a blood transfusion, he may not make it through the night. So he had to have our permission. And we said, absolutely. And we knew that we were facing a decision. We knew that having gone a week with nothing positive other than a dog that was friendly and a dog that would wag his tail and have a sweet demeanor, everything else was always no good news or a little bit worse. So the next day was Tuesday, and Zane had a speaking engagement in Birmingham that would end at noon, and his plan was to come straight from that engagement to Auburn. I and one of my twin daughters, who was so fortunate to be given an off day. She was supposed to work at the hospital. She's a surgical nurse. She was supposed to work that day, and they let her off so graciously. And she got to go with me, for which I am so thankful. And then I have a daughter who is a student at Auburn who was already there, and she met us there. So my daughter Judd and I left Tuesday morning. We met Emma at the veterinary hospital. It was about 11 o'clock. And we said, we're here. We're here to see Cam. We want him to be with us. And they brought him out, and he was wearing a cone, and we could tell he was glad to see us, but he wasn't himself. His tail didn't wag. He was just lumbering. But we took the cone off and we said, we want to keep him out here. And the doctor said, well, we'll stay out here and then we'll come get him, take him back in for more tests. And I said, really don't think we're going to want him to go back in. We're going to want him to be with us all day. He said, whatever you want. And we spread a blanket under a beautiful tree in front of to the side of the clinic. And it was the most beautiful day that God could have given us. And we had not had great weather in Birmingham. In hindsight, the next day was not a great weather day, but that day was beautiful. It was warm, but there was a lovely breeze. But we made a place under a tree, and Judd, Emma, and I, all day long, we were with Cam. We petted him, we held him, we laid down on the blanket with him. We took turns snuggling up against him. I guess I kissed his snout 100 times, and I told him how great he was. I talked to him like I always did. I always talked to him like he was a person. I just told him how great he was, and he was the best dog ever, and just did all that. And then we made some FaceTime calls. We FaceTimed his Aunt Cindy, who is one of my best friends, because Cam and her grand dog Winston, who are half brothers, they brought us together, and we had a beautiful year and a half of almost daily play dates. And during all those times, of course, Cindy and I would bring the dogs together to play. We became just the best of friends. So we FaceTimed her. We FaceTimed her daughter, Winston's mom, Hannah, and everybody it was tough. It was tough because there were bonds there. Hannah sent a video of Winston and Cam that we played for Cam, and he watched every bit of it. And we FaceTimed my best friend, and we FaceTimed Cam's other sister who couldn't be there because she was working. So we just did all the things that we thought would make him feel loved and special and connected. And as we were still waiting on Zane, it's about a 2 hour drive from Birmingham. So we were waiting on him. And as the day, once we had gotten settled under the tree, Cam seemed to perk up to the point where he would sit up and he would listen and he would look at us, but he was very quiet. He would press up against us, but there was no pep in his step. And the doctor had told us that the transfusion would not last. It was just a very temporary band-aid. And we saw it was almost like it was on the hour that he went from keeping his eyes open and being alert to seeming to get more sleepy. And then he lay down. I lay down beside him and he slept. And one thing that was very, very difficult for me was that his stomach was very distended. And the doctor said that that was his liver and his spleen, and that it could just be a very strong reaction to an infection, which he said was becoming, in his estimation, less and less likely, and more likely that it was some sort of cancer or tumors. That the only possible way to know that might be a bone marrow draw that he said that we could have done that day. And he said it would require full anesthesia and injecting a bone. And he said recovery, that there would be some bone pain, that's not a painless procedure. And then he also said, and it's not guaranteed to tell us anything. It just might tell us something. So we're dealing with those kind of things that, what is it? Well, we can't know. We don't know. Tick tests would be probably obscured by the fact that he had been on doxycycline. So that was not something we could pinpoint with accuracy at that time. And cancer could not be definitively diagnosed because there would be tests required that might go beyond bone marrow and that might take weeks or even a month, depending upon what stage it might be, because testing has to be done at specific times and specific illnesses to be able to be accurate. So that in itself was one of the hardest things, is that we couldn't just wait X number of hours and know that we were going to know what was wrong. But as my daughters and I sat with him for hours, we knew that our boy was not himself, and we knew that he was very, very, very sick. As the afternoon waned on, and the Dr. Spender, who was fabulous, he did come out and sit with us, as did his resident, for about 20, 30 minutes, and just went over all of this with us. The fact that, we can't really know. It could take weeks, and it wasn't a good idea for us to bring him home because of his low platelet count and his risk of internal bleeding. As many of you may know, internal bleeding can escalate quickly to a fatal situation. So because he was at such risk of that, driving to Birmingham and just having to be maybe taken to an emergency vet, if that happened, that was not an ideal situation. So the only option really that we were faced with as far as pursuing something medical was to keep him there over days, possibly weeks, and continue doing more invasive tests that may or may not yield an answer. And when we saw that he came out wearing a cone, which they had to do because he had the catheter that they did not want him to chew off, but he came out in a cone after all those days of being in a cage where they said every day he was barking. Knowing our baby, we knew that was not what we wanted to send him back to, even though he would be going back into the best possible care with the best of the best. It meant being away from us, being in pain, being in a cage alone. So as we waited on Zane, the girls and I talked and we watched him and we prayed, and we knew that we were going to have to make a hard decision. And we didn't want to make a decision until Zane got there. And he was about an hour away, and Cam started coughing. And the doctor had told us that he had done that a little bit earlier that morning. And he said it could be that there's internal bleeding and it's getting in his throat, or that his nose is bleeding in the back and it's dripping into his throat and it's causing him to choke. So it wasn't just a cough. It was a cough that was, it was scary. And he started doing that frequently the last hour before Zane got there. And it was to the point, and the girls and I were out there alone. The doctors were not out there at that point. And the girls and I, we were very, very scared. And I said, girls, we might have to make a decision before your dad gets back because this is not good. And we were all so afraid. And we were calling Zane, how far are you away? And anyway, we got him to stop and we just tried to sit him up where he wouldn't, we felt like that would help him not cough as much. But things were just, it's almost like it just kept going downhill and kept getting sadder and sadder. And finally, Zane said he was 10 minutes out. So we called the hospital and told them to tell Dr. Sender that Zane would be there in 10 minutes. So Zane pulled up. I've never been so happy to see someone because Zane is very strong and he loves Cam with all of his heart, but we knew he would bring clarity to whatever we needed to do and that he would help us know what to do and when to do it, and that he would be able to communicate with the doctors about what we might have to do. So Zane got there and he came and he joined us in loving on Cam, and he just talked to Cam and said, buddy, anyway, just spent very sweet time. And then the doctor came out with the resident, who was also absolutely wonderful. And he relayed to Zane what he had shared with us. And even though he would not say yes, Zane framed the question to him, is he likely to get better? And without saying the word no, the doctor said, we've had all of these days and we've done all of these things and things have moved backward. And it's almost like we can't catch up. We've not had a break. So to just say things might get better would be it would be a stretch. So we knew, looking at our dog, who we knew was not himself, we knew he was bleeding. We knew that he would require more transfusions just to keep going, and that transfusions were not therapeutic. They were just a Band-Aid to just help him keep going. They were not healing him or making him better. So we did know what we had to do, and that was the next step in our conversation. And that was a hard conversation, but if you ever face this, you know that you have to look at it from two angles. You have to look at the decision to euthanize, and I hate that word, but that is the term when you decide to give your pet the injection that releases them, lets them peacefully depart. But when you are faced with that, you have how it will affect you, which is, it is gut wrenching, versus how it will affect your pet. And we knew, and I even said from the beginning to the different veterinarians that he saw before Auburn, I said, is he in pain? I do not want him in pain. And the only pain I would have ever been okay with would be one that might be temporary and leading us to hope or healing. And there was none of that. So we knew that for Cam, for the best of Cam, for not having to go back to a cage, not having to have a cone, not having to be away from us, and not having any pain, we knew that that was our decision. So the way we did that, and it was so kind and compassionate, the doctor and the resident, Brian, could not have made it more easy and sweet as something like that could be. And they have a beautiful courtyard. You have an option to go into a room in the clinic that's set aside for this, or to go into the courtyard. And we said, no, let's go to the courtyard. It was beautiful. We carried the blanket, and Cam was able to walk. He walked slowly because his energy was just waning. And we went into the courtyard, and The doctor sat down, the resident sat down. They were not rushing us. There was no pressure, no expectation, no, we've got to hurry. We've got an appointment, we've got somewhere to be. None of that. And my girls helped me walk back there. It was a very excruciating walk for all of us. We got on the blanket with our baby, with our buddy, and we all just got around him. And oh, he knew he was loved. I mean, he was where he loved to be, in the middle of his people. And Dr. Cinder explained to us exactly what was going to happen. And there are 2 injections, and the first one is just one that makes them sleepy and makes them calm. And it's just a sweet sedative that it's just to ease them into the next one, which is what will ease them into just a peaceful, painless passing. So he explained that, and he said, I'm here, and you just tell me, take as long as you need. And I knew that I needed to leave before they injected Cam, because I had had all day to hold him and love him the way he always felt. And I wanted him to be held until the very end, but I didn't want that to be my last memory or the last way that I felt his sweet body that I loved and held for 6 years. So my family said that they would stay, and the resident took me out. And the family said that when I walked out, that he tried to follow me, which is probably the hardest. But then there was a sweet ending, because they said it was sweet. They said it was a beautiful, sweet, gentle, compassionate ending. And they said he was so relaxed and that he had the most peaceful look. And they said his face looked at peace, whereas all day there was a sweet look, but there was pain and there was something that wasn't him. So that was how we said goodbye to the best buddy that I've ever had, my best friend. And I know many of you listening, you have gone through this, and you know and you understand. And there may be those of you listening who this is something that might lie ahead for you. But I just want to leave you with this. There are so many voices that might want to say, do this, this is right, this is wrong, you must do this, you must press on, you need to go until there's no other hope, you need to stop when there's any sign of pain. You just will have voices. But in the end, the only voice that matters is the one that is yours. You are the one who loves your baby, your dog, your pet the most. And if you are that person that loves the deepest and the hardest, you're going to make the right decision. And you have to trust your gut and your knowledge of how your pet is doing or might do if things are prolonged, and your relationship with the doctor who's with you at that point of decision. And it is the hardest thing that I've ever had to do, because you will second guess yourself, or you may. But I will say that when the resident walked me out while we were waiting on the family, this voice in my head said, oh my goodness, did we do everything? Did I do the right thing? And I said, Brian, did we do the right thing? And he said, yes. And I said, why? And he said, because he wasn't going to get better. And I was so grateful for that, because I knew what I already knew in my gut, but I heard it from someone who knew even more so from a medical standpoint. So I hope that somehow this story of our Cam and his sweet life of 6 years and the way we let him go, I hope this somehow blesses and ministers to someone who might need it. And to those of you who have known and loved Cam, whether in person or online or through Instagram, I thank you for loving him, and thank you for loving me with all of your words of encouragement and prayer and support. And it's hard, but I trust that with time, I will just hold on to the sweet memories and that I will be able to open my heart again. And the love of a pet is something that you do take a risk of that hurt at the end. But in my opinion, I would take that love over and over again than being without that love that is like no other. So thank you all. Thank you all so much for listening and sharing in this story with me. And I wish you all God's greatest blessings. Thank you so very much.